All right, so 4-4 is interpreting two-way frequency tables, okay? And a two-way frequency table is just a really fancy term for a table that shows data from a poll, okay? So if you survey or poll a group of people and you want to compare the data, you would do it using this two-way frequency table. And the reason it's two ways is because you're comparing two different things. In this case, we're comparing the age of people and we're comparing the activity of skiing versus snowboarding. So that's why it's a two-way table, is because you're comparing two different sets of data, okay? And you're dividing it up, skiing and snowboarding, and then you're dividing it up based on their age, okay? So activity and age, those are the two sets of data that we can get from this. All right, so the first thing there on the next page, it says construct a two-way frequency table. So in this example, it says Jensen asked 100 people at his school whether they prefer digital or print textbooks. Construct a two-way frequency table that shows the relationship between the person's position and their textbook preference. So the two sets of data here are their position, meaning are they a student or a teacher? Okay, so their position and whether or not they prefer digital or print. One of the things that I want to point out is that it doesn't really matter. If you look at this colored version up here, they've got digital and print across the top. So they've got their preference across the top. And then they have whether or not they are a student or a teacher across the side. Okay. If you look at this one right here, they've got whether or not they're a student or teacher across the top, and they've got whether or not they prefer digital or print across the side. It doesn't matter. Okay. It really doesn't matter which way you go, because if you look at this, if we look at the number of students that prefer print, we would go number of students that prefer print, right, down from print, and where those two intersect is 28. If you look at the table going the other direction, the number of students that prefer print still intersects at 28. So in both tables, we get that 28 is the number of students that prefer print. So it doesn't really matter which one you put on top and which one you put down the side. Okay, that's one thing I wanted to point out. The other thing is that you want to always tally your rows and your columns. Okay, so let me erase this here. So if you look at this one, okay, your rows go this way. These are your rows, and you'll notice that they total each row. Okay, your columns go this way, and they totaled each column. And then the one thing that's really important to note is that 100 people were asked. So a total of 100 people were polled. This number right here in the bottom corner of your table is going to be your total number of people polled. And your column running up and down should add up to 100. And your bottom row should tally 100. So it kind of should all converge in that bottom right corner. And everything should add up to equal that bottom corner. And that's always a good thing to check right at the last second, is tally up your bottom row, make sure it equals that box. Tally up your outside column and your total column and make sure that it equals that box, okay? And that'll make sure that your frequency table doesn't have any errors in it, okay? All right. So let's try it. Now, I think these are fun. This, to me, I'm a puzzle person though, so I really like kind of this puzzle idea, and that's really what this is, because they give you just enough information to get you started, and then it's almost like a domino effect. Once you fill in one box, that lets you fill in another box, which lets you fill in another box, and you kind of domino your way through it. Okay. And there's not always just one place to start, and I'll show you that here in a second. But you do have to find one place where you're given all the information in a row or a column except for one box, and then you know you can fill that in. So if we look at this, it says a weatherman asked 75 people from 2 different cities if they own rain boots. Complete the two-way frequency table to show the results of the survey. So we have city A and city B, and then we have the answers yes and no. Okay, and then we have the total column. So looking at this based on the information that we have, we know the total right here of row A is 32, right? And we know that 19 of those are no's. So can we find the number of yeses? Okay, so everybody should have a calculator, because we're going to go around the room. Everybody's going to participate. What is the total number for city A What is the total number of yeses? Aiden? 13. And you get that by subtracting 32 minus 19 gives you 13. So 13 yeses, 19 no's. The total for city A is 32. Okay. Now with that information, now we have enough that we can, yeah. Oh, hang on. Now we have enough that we can add up column yes, right? Because we have both the A and the B information. So somebody else give me the total for column yes. Jace? 41, okay? 13 plus 28. We can tally up. Now that we have both boxes filled in for yes, now we can add up column yes. Now we have that bottom total row. We know that the total is 41 plus 34. So can we get that final corner box? Micah? 75. Okay, now I want to check something and show you something really quickly. At the very beginning of the story, the very first sentence was that a weatherman asked 75 people. So does it make sense that this box was 75? And you could have filled that in first. Okay, we eventually got to it, but because of that first line that says the weatherman asked 75 people, you actually could have started. And remember when I said there's not always exactly one place to start? Sometimes there's a few different places. We started with the one row that we could fill in, which is fine. And we eventually got around to that 75, or you could have filled in that 75 first. And you could have worked backwards and gotten the 41 and then gotten the 13 and kind of worked yourself around the other way. And there's really no right or wrong way to do it as long as you're adding and subtracting the columns that you need to do to get what you need. All right. So from there, what can we go to next? Remember I said it's kind of like a domino. Once we get one, it kind of falls into place. Maddie? Yeah, we can go up this way. We've got 34. We can subtract the 19 and we get what? 15. So we can fill in that city B of the no's. We can fill in that that's 15. And then the last one, you've got a couple of different ways you can find it, but somebody that hasn't answered yet, Brady, what would be the column, the add up row B? Okay, so you're going up the column side of totals. Good. What's 75 minus 32? What is it? 43. Okay. And if you add 28 and 15, you would get 43 as well. And then you always want to just double check yourself, add up your outside column. It should equal 75. Add up your bottom row. It should also equal 75. So they should all converge in that outside corner. Yes.
Do you want me to draw all of this with that paper?
I would draw this box real quick and fill in what, at least the ones that you're going to need to fill in your notes. Yes. Okay. The other thing you can do is go back and scoot the video forward and pause it, and you can fill in your notes that way as well. Okay. All right. It says, what pattern do you see in the two-way frequency table? Well, we've already talked about it. The pattern is that outside column and the bottom row both should tally 75, or both should tally the total number of people surveyed. Okay. All right. It says example 2, interpret a two-way frequency table. It says the two-way frequency table shows the results of a media survey. People responded to the question, do you spend more time watching the Winter or the Summer Olympics on television? Decide if the following statement is true or false. So first of all, let's look at our table. We have across the top, we have winter versus summer, and down the side, we have men versus women. Okay, that's the way they've broken out this particular poll. So it says the statement that we have to decide whether or not it's true or false. The statement is that more men than women watch the Winter Olympics. Now, this is where it can get a little bit tricky, and I want to kind of point out the difference and then show you how you can decide how you would answer this. A lot of people just right off the bat look and see 45 men, 27 women. Well, the answer must be men, because 45 men said that they watched the Winter Olympics. The problem with that, if you do it just by that itself, who's to say that 27 women were polled and all of them said winter, but maybe 200 men were polled and only 45 said winter? So if the men and the women, if the number of men and women polled right here isn't the same, you can't just answer based on this number right here. Okay. If this number right here is not identical, if the number of men and women polled isn't identical, you can't just go by the raw data. You have to do a little bit of tallying. You have to figure ratios. So sometimes when you're asked men or women who did it more, or whatever the poll is, right? City A, city B, who did it more? Sometimes you can just pull raw data right from the table. Sometimes you have to figure ratios. And the way you decide that is the base number the same? If you're asking the difference between men and women, was the number of men and women polled the same? If it was, then you're good to just use the raw data from the table. If it was different, like here, you actually have to do a little bit of ratio work. So what does that look like? Well, they've done it here for us. If we look at the men's total, right, it was 75 men out of 79 that were polled. So 0.57% of the men, or 0.57 or 57% of the men said they watched the Winter Olympics. Then if you look at the women's data right here, it's 27 women out of 71. When you put that as a fraction and then make it a decimal, you can see that 0.38 or 38% of women. So is the statement more men than women watch the Winter Olympics true? Yes or no? Do more men than women prefer the Winter Olympics? Yes or no? It is true. Now, again, it looked like right off the bat, 45 is bigger than 27. So it looked like we should be able to answer yes. But you can't just use those numbers if the number polled wasn't the same. Okay, so you just really have to watch that. Stop with the giggles or get out. I don't know how many more times I have to say it, but I am done saying it. Are we okay? I'm done. The next time I look at you and you're giggling, you're gone. And you're gone for the rest of the week, because I'm not having Miss Hain deal with it either. So you just have to be careful about the question being asked, okay? If the two things you're comparing are identical in numbers, you can just look at who said yes and who said no. If the two things you're comparing aren't identical, like the number of men and the number of women, you have to figure the ratio, all right? So sometimes that can get a little tricky. So if you get it wrong on a Math Excel, look and see whether or not you use the ratio or the raw data, and see if maybe you need to tweak how you figure it, okay? All right. So yes, because, and again, if you want to change this to percentages, 57% of men said they prefer winter. Only 38% of women said they preferred winter. So the data does back up that men over women do prefer the Winter Olympics. Okay. All right. So this says construct and interpret a two-way frequency table. Now this construction is a little bit different. In this one, we were given some information and we just kind of had to use that puzzle idea, right, Dayton? What's the answer? What's the answer to the question I just asked? Don't know? Pick up your pencil and write what we're writing. Here we had to finish a table by having some empty information, and we had to just fill in what we knew. Okay. Here we're given a paragraph and we actually have to fill in the whole table. So if you look at the try it, because there's really not much we can do with that example other than understand that they give you the information in this right here, and you have to fill it in the table where it goes. So if we do this try it, it's 100 students were asked how they traveled to school. Of the girls, right? So right now we're talking about of the girls. So we are going to fill in the information on the girl row. So we want to make sure that we're putting the information in the right place. Of the girls, 19 rode in a car. So in the girl row under car, we would put 19. 7 rode in a bus. So under the bus, we would put a 7. And 27 took the train. So we would put a 27 under the train on the girl row. Then it switches and it says that of the boys, right? So then we switch to of the boys. So we want to make sure now that we're filling information in on the boy row. And you have to be careful because this actually tripped me up earlier today when I was doing this. It says of the boys, 12 took the train. Well, just kind of out of a knee-jerk reaction, I put a 12 right here because I was expecting them to give the boy information in the same order that they gave the girl information. That's actually not the train row. So you just have to be careful, or the train column. You have to be careful. They're not always going to give you the information in the order that the table's at. So you got to make sure you're in the right box, okay? So of the boys, 12 took the train. So you got to make sure you're in the train column, which is over here. 24 rode in a car. Now we're over in the car. 25, sorry. And then 10 rode in a bus. So boys on a bus is 10. Now you got to tally all your rows and columns. So who haven't I heard from? Briley, if you would tally the boy row, Dayton tally the girl row, Maddie Miller tally the cars, Essie tally the buses, Dalton tally the trains, and Casey give us our final total. Okay? Raise your hand when you have your number. Dayton? Okay, so you tallied the girls, right? Okay, so the tally of the girls was 53. When I call on you, tell me what you tallied. Briley was the what? Total boys, 47. Okay, who was my car? Maddie Miller, what's my car total? Okay, 44. What's my bus total? Essie? 17. Dalton, what's my train total? 39. And Casey, what was my total? 100. Okay, and always make sure that this adds up to 100 and this adds up to 100. Okay. And then it says, tell which mode of transportation is the most popular. So of the car, bus, and train, which one is the most popular? Car, because there was 44 of the 100, 44 picked car. Okay. What if I ask you what's the most popular mode of transportation amongst girls? Train. What's the most popular mode of transportation amongst boys? Car. Very good. All right. So under key concepts, really we're done with the new material. The only thing I want to show you is how to decide whether or not you need to use ratio or raw data. Okay. And when I say raw data, I mean straight out of the table. So if you'll go down to number 9 in your homework. So you're going to do 6 through 10 for your homework. Okay, but I want to talk to you about number 9. So number 9 says students at a local school were asked about how many hours they spend doing homework. The two-way frequency table shows the results of the survey. Classify the statement below as true or false. So just first look at your table. Across the top, you have number of hours that they do homework. And then down the side, you've got by grade, right? So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then it asks if this is a true statement. The statement is that more students study for from 5 to 6 than from 1 to 2. So when it says more students, does it break it down by grade or by anything like that? Or are they talking about of all 492 when it says more students? What do you guys think? Does that little statement break it down by grade, or is that everybody? Everybody. Okay. So because it's everybody, if I was going to write this as a ratio, okay, so let's look at the 5 to 6 hour studiers, right? If I was going to write this as a ratio, I would say that 104 out of all students, which is 492, right? That's the ratio of the 5 to 6 hour studiers. Now, if I look at the data of the 1 to 2 hour studiers, okay, the data of the 1 to 2, these are these guys right here that study 1 to 2. If I look at their data, it's 147 out of all the students, 492. Notice my denominator is the same. If my denominator is the same, meaning it's out of all the students in the whole poll, I don't need to do a ratio because it's obvious that 147 is a higher number than 104. Does that make sense? So notice my denominator was the same. Notice when we did this example up here, right? Out of the men that preferred the winter, it was 45 over 79. The women was 27 out of 71. My denominator was different. If this had been 79 and 79, right, then I could have not worried about the ratio. I could have just looked and said 45 is a higher number. So that's an easy answer. So that's what I mean by looking at your denominators. And if you're not sure, go ahead and set it up as a ratio. Because when in doubt, the ratio will always be the right answer. Sometimes you just don't have to set it up as a ratio. Okay, so you just kind of have to, each problem is going to be very individual. and each problem is going to be different. When it asks you, do more people do this than this? You have to figure out, is this going to be a ratio kind of problem, or can I just pull the data? If you're not sure, go ahead and set it up as a ratio. And if you notice that your bottom number is the same, then you don't need to worry about the ratio. If your bottom number is not the same, then go ahead and tally your ratio to answer the question. Okay. All right. So for today, your homework is your workbook numbers 6 through 10. Notice I crossed out number 11, so you can cross out number 11. Tomorrow in class, you will do the Math Excel. And I haven't worked it yet myself, so I don't know whether or not you will need to do paper and turn it in. Because remember, I said if I need paper, I'll have you use paper. So look at Canvas to know tomorrow when you get in here, look at Canvas for the directions. If it says no paper required, then you know you're not going to turn any in. If it says paper required, then you know you're going to need to. So check Canvas for those instructions. As always, you do need to score above an 80. And then when you're finished with that, you'll work on the topic 4 review tomorrow and Friday. Check it with Miss Hain on Friday, and then on Monday, we'll take the test. Okay? For those of you at home, email me if you have any questions.